Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me and hopefully you can all see me wherever you might be. Okay, so today we're going to be having a look at some musical instruments, and we're going to be having a look at the different instruments that actually that I can play. And one of the questions that I'm always getting asked whenever I'm in school is just how many instruments can you play? And I thought today would be a good time to answer that question. Right. Let's start at the beginning then. So another question I'm always getting is, how long have you been playing musical instruments, Mr. Stanton? And the answer for that is, I don't really know. I started messing about with musical instruments when I was about 4 years old. And the reason for that is my mum used to play a really, really special musical instrument. And you might have seen from the thumbnail that was on screen just before we started, a picture of that. And that was this instrument here. So this instrument here was the first ever instrument that I had a little go on. And this one was called piano accordion. Okay. And my mum used to play one of these. And quite often you find, don't you, when your mum or dad do something, they're really keen for you to have a go at it. And my mum was really, really keen for me to have a go at this musical instrument. So the way it works is you put this strap over your shoulder like this, and then the right hand here, okay, is just like a piano, and the left hand has got some buttons. So let's have a little look at how it sounds. You have to undo these special straps here because they allow these bits in the middle to move in and out that are called the bellows and are made out of paper. So I'm going to press a button here and I'm going to pull the bellows. There we go. So that's what the accordion sounds like. Now the right hand works just like a piano. But the left hand does something really quite special. It's got these buttons here, and the left hand makes a chord sound. So let's have a listen to those. So when you put it all together, you can actually make the sound of a sort of band, really. So that was the first ever instrument that I had a go on. Okay. So hopefully that's answered one of the questions that I always get asked is, when did you start playing? And it was around about 4 or 5 years old. So if you're in Key Stage 1, that's a really good time to start. And what was the first instrument you had a go on? So the first instrument I ever had a go on was this one here. Now, another question that I quite often get asked, what's your best instrument? Now, my best instrument is not the accordion. You might have noticed that. Okay, I'm actually a bit rusty on the accordion. But don't tell my mum. My best instrument is this one here. Now, this is a very, very special instrument. This one is my violin, and it was given to me by my violin teacher. Now, Miss Crowder, my violin teacher, she was a wonderful lady, and she said, if I could play Handel's sonata in concert, she'd give me her violin. And that's how I ended up with this one. And it's a very special instrument because, can you see, it's very, very dark wood. If you compare it to the wood on the back of my cabin, you can see that this is very, very dark. And that's because the family that make these violins are called the Mittenwalds, and they live in Germany and they use a very, very dark varnish. The other thing that's very special about this instrument is the head. this bit here. We call the head of the instrument the scroll. And can you see that mine has got this lovely carved head? It's got this lovely carved head. And the story goes that when the Mittenwalds make a violin, okay, they put a spirit of an animal inside it. So I've got a wolf on the top of my violin, which should mean that my violin is a ferocious sounding instrument. Now, to play the violin, we use this special stick here, which is called a bow. And it's made out of a special wood, which has got another funny name. It's called Pernambuco. From one end to the other, we've got this very, very special white stuff here. And this is horsehair. So the horsehair is stretched across the Pernambuco wood, and that makes the bow. So when we put the violin on our shoulder like this and pull the hair across the string, you get that nice sound. There we go. That was called O'Callaghan's Air. And O'Callaghan was a blind harpist, a blind Irish harpist. And he wrote that lovely piece of music at about the same time that this violin was being made. So this violin was made a long time ago. It was actually made 200 years ago. 200 years ago, and it's still going strong. And if anyone's asking, no, I didn't have it from new. No, I didn't have it from new. I'm not quite that old. So that's my best instrument, the violin, and this is my very special one. And we call the lion at the top, we call that Fred. Okay, I'm not sure whether he's a lion or a wolf, but he's called Fred anyway. Now, another question I'm always getting is, okay, so you can play the violin and you can play the accordion, but just how many can you play? And do you know, the answer to that is I'm not entirely sure how many I can play, because what you tend to find is that if you can play one instrument, you can quite often play another. So if we go back to the accordion here, can we see that this bit here on the accordion looks very much like a piano? And if you imagine we got the accordion and we put it like that, we would probably end up with something that looks a little bit like this. And you can see this is one of the keyboards that we use at school, okay? And because I started to learn the piano, I can play a little bit of normal piano, because really it's a bit like playing the accordion. Instead of playing it like this, you play it like this, okay? So quite often you find if you can play one instrument, you can cross over and pick up another one quite easily. There we go. So that's my keyboard, and I've no doubt you've all heard me playing the keyboard at school. Now, another really special instrument to me, okay, is just like my violin, because when I was about 16 or 17, I was playing in a show, and playing in shows is great fun because you get to watch all of the actors and actresses and dancers and things on the stage. You get to do it for free, just sitting downstairs and playing a little bit of music. And I was playing a show, a wonderful show called Bugsy Malone. And in Bugsy Malone, there's a wonderful banjo part. And unfortunately, the banjo player wasn't very well one night. And the musical director, the gentleman who was in charge of the band, said to me, he said, "Do you think you could play that banjo?" And I said, "No, not a clue. I wouldn't know how to play the banjo." He said, "Well, mandolin is the same as the violin. Do you think you could play the mandolin?" So I said, "Well, let's give it a go." So I ended up starting to play this wonderful instrument here. Now, can we see that it's similar to a violin? We see it's similar to a violin. It's got some features that are the same. So it's made out of wood. That's one of the things that's the same. it's got these lovely sound holes here. Lovely sound holes here. Now, if we compare that to the ukulele, which you've probably heard me playing again around school, the sound hole's in a different place. The sound hole's in the middle there. It's got all of these pegs up at the top. And each one of those goes down to a string. Each one of those goes down to a string, which we use to tune the instrument. Now, one thing that's not quite the same is that on this one, I've got these little gold lines. We call those frets, and they help us to put our fingers on the strings. So if I play you a couple of chords on the mandolin now. There we go. So that's the mandolin. And because it's got the same strings on as the violin, I can sort of have a little go and I can kind of play a little bit on this. Not terribly good, but I can have a little go. And you might have even heard me playing it in assembly sometimes. So that's the mandolin, similar to the violin, okay, but not quite the same. Now, the last question I always get is, what's your favorite instrument? Right, well, favorite, I've got to say, is the violin. But at school, we don't really do an awful lot of violin okay, because the violin's not really that sort of instrument. It's not one you'd really sing along to. And at school, we always like to have a good sing song. Now, you've probably seen me playing one of these, okay? So one of these is called the ukulele. And we have our special spot system up here. And from that, we learn to play ukulele chords. And I must admit, at the minute, probably the ukulele is my favorite instrument to play at school because we have such fun using it for singing and using it for playing in bands. And I've even treated myself to a new one. Santa Claus was really, really kind to me this year and bought me lots of ukulele equipment. So I've got a nice new ukulele that I'm looking forward to using with you at school. Now, quite often at school, I get asked another question. I get, why is your ukulele bigger than mine? The reason for that is because my hands are a little bit bigger than yours. And I find this one a little bit more comfortable to play. But when I had little hands, I used to play this one. So this was my first ukulele, okay? And it's got exactly the same strings as the big one, okay? And I put them in my fingers in exactly the same positions to get the same chords. The only difference is that it's a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit quieter. Right, what I'd like you to do now, and we can have a go at this for another 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, okay, is I'd like you to rewatch the video and I'd like you to have a go at creating a little bit of a fact file about each one of the instruments. So what I'd like is a picture, first of all. I'd like a lovely picture of the accordion, and then perhaps you could mention some of the things that we've got on the accordion. So you might mention the piano keyboard. You might mention the bellows in the middle that go in and out to produce the sound. You might mention the buttons that are on there. You might mention the strap that we use to stop the bellows going in and out. And you might mention the strap that goes around the back. So if you choose to do the piano accordion, you can create a fact file and a picture based on what you've seen on this video. It might be that you think, do you know, I really, really want to talk about the lovely violin that I've seen. So you draw a picture of the violin, okay, and you might mention the wonderful carved head. You might mention the special stick that I use, the Pernambuco wood. You might mention the horsehair that we use. You could mention as well the fact that you pull the bow along the string to make a sound. You might decide that you are going to do the mandolin. So if you choose to do the mandolin, you might mention all of these machine heads here, all 8 of them. You might mention the lovely sound holes. You might draw a picture of the shape of it. See how it's got that lovely shape to it. You might decide that you are going to do the ukulele, in which case you draw the round sound hole. And only 4 pegs this time, but you might draw these gold bars that go along on here called frets. So what I'd like is a picture and a few words or a few little sentences just explaining what it's like and how it works. And I will see you next week at the same time on this channel. Goodbye, cheerio, and see you soon.